2022 is over and done. 2023 is ahead of us. But what we do at the end of every year is we look back on where we've been, what we've seen, what we've done, the friends we've made along the way. And that's what I'm going to do for you now, is go back over some of the best moments of 2022 with regards to Nebraska's Cornhusker sports. I am John Johnston, CornNation, and please subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button on this video so more people will see it. And thank you guys and gals for the support so far. Okay, let's get into it. I picked 8 moments. I didn't go to 10 because, there weren't that many great moments this year. There just weren't. It wasn't the greatest year for Nebraska sports. Well, as we move into this, we'll talk more about that. But 8. I picked 8. So at number 8, I included baseball. And let's face it, there were not very many good moments from baseball, but there was one. One of the games against Iowa, a series we ultimately lost, Garrett Anglim hit 3 home runs in a game. And it was only 4th time in Husker history that anybody had done that. And we won, and we beat Iowa 12-1. Like I said, we lost the series. And it wasn't a good year for Nebraska baseball, honestly. They finished 23-30 overall and 10th in the Big Ten, someplace Nebraska should never be. So we're looking for more good things, better things in 2023, because I wouldn't think they could get much worse. Okay, at number 7, Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer set the 2 records this year. He set the receiving yards in a season record, 71 receptions for 1,043 yards and 9 touchdowns, and he set the most yards in a game receiving record against Purdue with 237 yards. He was dynamic. He was fun to watch. The connection between him and Casey Thompson won us some games. And it would have been nice to have seen it continue into 2023, but it is not to be as Trey Palmer goes to the NFL. But he was one of the bright spots of the season. At number, 876, the men's basketball win over Creighton, and last night against Iowa. Creighton was ranked number 7 when we beat them, and we'll take that because you get some of those monkeys off their back. But it had been a long time since Nebraska had beaten Creighton. And either Creighton was way overrated, which is probably true, or Nebraska broke them, which we'll take because after they played us, they have sucked. And that's fun. Unless you're a Creighton fan, well, beating Creighton and beating Iowa are indication of something even bigger. And that is Fred Hoiberg is righting the ship. Last year, we got destroyed left and right, and it was a really terrible year for men's basketball. This year, this team is incredible at defense. They seem to be getting a little bit better at scoring, but they slow other teams down and they crush their spirit or something. I don't know what they do to them, but the other teams don't get as much offense as they normally do. Key is we have a men's basketball team that's watchable, that plays together like a team, and could potentially make some noise in the Big Ten this season. And that's much more exciting than it was the previous, mostly ever. So good job, Fred Hoiberg. Keep it up and keep moving up. Next up, Nebraska women's softball winning the Big Ten tournament. Probably could be higher on the list. It probably could be number 2 or number 1, but honestly, softball doesn't get the coverage that it should. Nebraska softball is fun. I think that we have a good stadium. We have a good venue for it. It's just not heavily followed, but it does have its fans. And it was another example of a women's team far outperforming any of the men's team in Nebraska, and that should be recognized. Next up, volleyball. Volleyball didn't have the year that we wanted. In fact, they had, as Nebraska standards for volleyball go, they did not have a good season at all. I am going to pick one game, however, because I think it's indicative of one thing I enjoy about volleyball that doesn't get talked about very much. In the Northwestern game on November 6th, Northwestern, the Wildcat setter, Sienna Nordermeer, was injured when she flew into a bench or into the stands, and she had to be taken out on a stretcher. And the two teams came together and prayed, and I think that's the thing that we kind of miss about volleyball. Volleyball is rarely snarky. The sportsmanship is excellent. I think you see it in the coaches and how they respect each other and how they talk about each other. I think that they have a lot of respects for other programs, and there was nothing more indicative of that than the November 6th game. Nebraska had some definite ups and downs throughout the year, but that's the moment for me in Nebraska volleyball, and I know we all love volleyball very much. And it was sad to see Matt Kubik and Nicklin Hames and Kenzie Knuckles move on, but that's the nature of the sport. Next up, the football win over Iowa. Well, we got that monkey off our back. We don't have to hear it anymore. In fact, we can make fun of them because they're still stuck with Kirk and Brian Ferentz. And I don't think things are going to get any better for them. But you can come back next year at this time if I was just kicking ass everywhere and make fun of me for bad predictions. Winning against Iowa, I think it's pretty established that they're a rival. And beating them every year is much better than not beating them every year, which was what we did for a long time. 2022, if nothing else, that was it. Coming in at number 2, the second best moment of 2022 was when that guy got fired. I'm not even going to say his name anymore because I want really nothing much to do with him. And I think everybody feels the same way. Our Nebraska media obviously does. We've never seen any analysis of what went wrong or what happened. Maybe those are in the future. I certainly doubt it. But he's gone. And as much as we look for him to be a savior and to build the program, he did exactly the opposite and drove it straight into the ground. Much worse than his predecessor, Mike Riley, did. And so Scott Frost ended up the worst Nebraska football coach in school history. And hopefully we can forget about him and move on. But that moment's in there because for me, I looked at it and I thought, okay, the pain has stopped. And at least we can look forward to moving on. And what we did was move on, and number one moment of the year is pretty obvious, the hiring of Matt Rhule. It's interesting how this year in college football worked out. If you ask me when we fired that other guy, who I was for, I would have said Dave Aranda. Well, Dave Aranda didn't have a very good year. If you would have asked me another name, I would have gone with Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Well, he certainly didn't have a good year either. And Lance Leipold at Kansas, who started off like a burning hot coal and then faded toward the end, but had a good year for Kansas, but I think at the end of the season you really have had a problem selling him to Nebraska fans. So what I'm trying to say is this. I think that, the stars, God interaligned, everything, the universe came together and said, here's Matt Rhule, your coach. And Matt Rhule walks in, and what's the first thing he does? Is he wins the press conference. I think he did a very excellent job. He speaks well. He can button his tie all the way up like a professional guy would who's getting paid millions of dollars a year to be the public face of a university. He speaks extremely well. He says exactly the things Nebraska wanted to hear about offensive linemen and defensive linemen and having good quarterbacks and running the ball and blocking and things like that. And, oh, my God, let's just see what he can do. I don't know. We'll do predictions in some other video, but between number 1 and number 2, that guy getting fired and a new guy coming in, I feel like you kind of, quite frankly, I don't feel like you could have screwed this whole thing up any worse than the former guy did. So I think Matt Rhule is just going to be a much better coach because he's going to pay attention to what he's actually doing, and Nebraska will start winning. Those are my moments for the 2022 Nebraska Cornhusker sports year. I'm sure I missed a lot, but I'd like to hear about yours. If you have any comments, please leave them, and we can have discussions and things like that, and I don't know, be nice to each other. Happy New Year. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for all the support this past year. I really appreciate the growth we've seen in our channel, and I'm having fun with it, and we'll see what happens coming forward into 2023. Go Big Red.